We're in hard times and some of us are going to need a lawyer. And if you need a lawyer, don't just react to a TV commercial. Get a copy of the Lawyers Consumer Directory, which is available absolutely free of charge at any 7-Eleven store throughout Central Florida. The Lawyers Consumer Directory is going to give you real hardcore knowledge on how to hire a lawyer and a lot of information on issues like bankruptcy, foreclosure, and more. Get the Lawyers Consumer Directory. It's absolutely free of charge at any 7-Eleven throughout Central Florida.
Ahora puedes demostrar tu orgullo hispano mientras manejas en la carretera con la nueva tablilla o placa de auto hispana conmemorando los 500 años del descubrimiento de Florida por Juan Ponce de León.
Obtén tu tablilla hispana este año y harás la diferencia.
Solo 1000 se necesitan para hacerla permanente.
Su donativo ayudará a estudiantes con becas.
Nuestra comunidad se beneficiará con más programas y servicios.
Resalta nuestra cultura, nuestras raíces.
Demostremos que en la unión está la fuerza.
Obtén tu tablilla hispana en el Departamento de Vehículos de Motor más cercano o llama hoy al 321-277-0850.
Hi, I'm Danny Ramos, and welcome to this week's edition of Hispanic Speak Out TV, brought to you every week on Bright House Channel 49. We've been on the air for the past 9 years, talking about what's interesting to the Hispanic community, Hispanic issues, and how the Hispanic community is affected by local politics and the economic situation. While everybody's talking about the Washington scandal and the Petraeus situation, naturally, Hispanics have some other agendas other than that. And one of the biggest things happening right now in the Hispanic community is whether or not Puerto Rico is going to become a state of the United States. And recently there was an election in Puerto Rico which reflected what was going to happen in the future. I'm here this week again with my co-host Jose Miranda and a specialist on Puerto Rican affairs, Tony Suarez, who's also an attorney here in Central Florida. Jose, Tony, how are you?
Hey.
Okay, so
buenos días.
How are you? Yeah. So what's going on with the situation in Puerto Rico?
Well, I think it's fascinating, and I think it's a real crux, the change in history. As we all know, Puerto Rico was an invaded island during the Spanish-American War, became a possession of bounty, and now, after so many years, from 1898 to now, we finally get the first expression that the community and the people living would like to go towards statehood. Well, up to this point, that mandate had never been shown, the majority had never been carried, and even though it's still not a mandate, I mean, you could still have 100% of the Puerto Ricans say they want to become a state, and it still would not become a state because the power is not within the Puerto Rican people. They don't have the power to vote. It's only within Congress. So the question is whether or not, now that they've manifested themselves with some sort of majority for the first time, will this become a mandate? Will the Congress actually pay attention or not? And what does that mean for the national picture? What does it mean for the Republicans? What does it mean for the Democrats? Interesting dynamics that we're about to uncover, and I hope to be in part of that mix, making it happen.
Well, let's say that we're talking, you're talking about this, you know all about it, and you're assuming, and we're all assuming that the public that's watching the show knows the history of this.
Right.
And basically what happens right now is Puerto Ricans are citizens of the United States.
Right.
They have been citizens since 1917?
Since 1917, right. When they were made by statute, they were made citizens of the United States. What does that mean? The Constitution, by way of the 14th Amendment, required that anybody born in the United States is a United States citizen automatically. That's the 14th Amendment. Now, what happens is that, excuse me, not 14th, 13th Amendment, the Puerto Ricans were not born in the United States proper. They were born in a territory that was in possession of the United States. So in 1917, the Congress created by statute those persons born on this territory can become United States citizens. Now, what does that mean? Because it's a question. If they don't have constitutionally protected citizenship and they only have statutory protected citizenship, does that mean that by act of Congress it can be pulled away? There's a lot of questions as to that issue. So among the things that will not be resolved is, among that issue, what kind of rights do Puerto Ricans have? But they are American citizens, but so long as they stay in the island, they could not vote for President of the United States, and they do not have representatives in Congress. They do not enjoy a Republican form of government, meaning they have representatives in the government that controls them. Whereas everything on the island is controlled by the federal government, whether it's the post office, the stamps, the food you drink, eat, and the drinks that you drink, and everything's controlled by the federal government, including their life, because they can get drafted, they do get sent off to war, and they have been fighting American war since 1917 and have died to defend the Constitution, but cannot vote for President of the United States. That is the current status.
So it's a second-class citizenship.
Well, that's why we call it. I know some people are upset about classification of a second-class citizen, but we can put it this way. It's a different citizenship. It's a citizenship where you have the right to travel to the United States without a visa, you get a passport, but you do not have the right to vote. You are basically something else.
So a soldier who's comes home from Afghanistan after spending a tour in Afghanistan, goes back to Puerto Rico, and can he vote for President of the United States?
Well, let's put it this way. He cannot not only vote, even if he's in Afghanistan in the foxhole with another guy that used to live was born in Puerto Rico but now lives in New York. The other guy from New York, he can vote for president, but the guy in the foxhole with him, the Puerto Rican, cannot vote for president.
Because his residence, his address,
that's right,
is Puerto Rico.
Because his address is in Puerto Rico, which is the black hole of the Caribbean.
Okay.
Now, isn't it my rough understanding of the Constitution here, when if they wish to become the 51st state, that certain rights and certain laws should be already in place that will be accepted by Congress. Is that right? Or they have to conform to those new laws?
There have been different over the years. There have been different forms. One is the Tennessee Plan, Alaska Plan. For example, my understanding, Tennessee just when they incorporated themselves, sent 2 senators and had an election, senators and congressmen, and just sent them to Washington and said, "Here we are, put us in there." Others have a petition and becomes a bill, right. and then the Congress authorizes the union with the after they petition.
Okay.
So they're different practices. It's not really written in the Constitution per se. Just say you have to ask for B membership, but how you ask is procedurally up in the air.
Now, we know that what happened on this past Tuesday, or the Tuesday before, right?
Yeah.
When they had this count, that there's still a majority of Latinos who did not vote. So, and there's some people that are arguing that that's a mandate in itself, that they don't want statehood, even though, what, 60%?
61% that voted for statehood.
Right.
And percentage, I don't say it was a majority. My understanding, it was maybe something like 20% of the people did not vote at all on that issue.
Right.
But that's silly. That's a silly argument. That if you win a majority of the people to vote, that's when you win.
Right.
We don't have to have 100% participation. In this country, you don't have 100% participation. If you win 51% of those that voted, you win, and that's all that counts.
Okay.
That's my position.
No, you have a lot of people that are pro statehood now,
right?
And yet the governor is anti.
Yeah.
How's that going to work?
That's interesting. That's really interesting because at the same time, 61% of the people that voted for statehood. They voted against the candidate representing statehood,
right.
and voted for the candidate who's going to sit on that mandate and say, "I don't care what you say,
right.
And I'm not going to do anything about it." Right. And frankly, Jose, the problem is that even if 100% of the Puerto Ricans voted for statehood, so what? Well, they can't do anything about it. It's Congress who's got to do something about it. Mm-hmm. So it's really upon us here in the States that have to move the agenda.
So what is the process that Congress has to take in order for Puerto Rico to become a state? What do they do? Somebody has to bring it to the floor and say, okay.
We've had all sorts of stuff. We've had people saying, have the United States Congress pass a bill authorizing a plebiscite for Puerto Rico. That's one way. And then once they voted, then Congress will take it up. That's one. The other one is just to have the people of Puerto Rico petition Congress directly for statehood.
So what was the election they just had that they got 61%?
Was a plebiscite.
Okay, so isn't that enough to bring it to Congress, and Congress?
No, because now that physically, someone has to physically say, okay, I got the results, let me go into Congress and say, Mr. Congressman, Mr. Speaker, here's a bill. So until this point, it's a nice, interesting vote. It's sitting in the books of the supervisor of elections in Puerto Rico, but now the next step is to take the petition to Congress and file a formal bill.
And they're not pushing that at all.
And the Puerto Ricans are not going to push it.
Right, they're not going to push it.
Well, which Puerto Ricans are not going to push it?
On the island, they're not going to push it.
You're talking about the governor?
The governor, exactly. The governor and his crew. They're not going to do anything about it.
Can it go forward without the governor?
Well, that's going to,
Can it go forward with the representative?
We do the Tennessee plan. We just vote our senators, vote our congressmen, and show up in Washington, D.C. and say, here we are.
What about the state representative? Doesn't Puerto Rico have a representative?
Yeah, they have a non-voting. They call them a resident commissioner, which basically is a non-voting observer, sort of like Rwanda or something. Yeah.
Okay, somebody hanging out.
And he hangs around there, makes believe he's a congressman, collects a salary too. So you know but he could do it, but I think he's from the same party. I'm not really sure because I don't follow it that closely. I
was told that by Dennis Freitas that he has sent a letter into the Congress. And unfortunately, I wasn't going to get a copy of that letter. I didn't get a copy of the letter by the time the show aired.
Right.
But he sent, I don't know what the content of the letter is, but knowing Dennis Freitas, okay, and Dennis Freitas is 100% pro-statehood,
right.
And he was saying, well, you know, the resident sent in a letter to the Congress, a 2-page letter.
Yeah, if the resident, and I think that happened here, is that the resident commissioner is of the statehood party, whereas the governor is of the Commonwealth party. So the resident commission, he can make the application, I guess, because again, there's no written. This doesn't happen quite often. Last time this happened was 1949, right? So this doesn't happen quite often.
So somebody's got to pick it up.
Someone's got to pick it up and put it before Congress, so the Congress has a vote on it, inviting Puerto Rico to be a state.
And that's why I said the consensus in the island, how these guys are trying to spin this, is that even though you got 61%, that because you got so many people who didn't vote, that they still haven't got a mandate yet.
Right.
You understand?
Yeah, but,
they're trying to jerry rig this.
Of course, but that's politicians. That's politicians. You know, they're all going to give. You know, 100% people voted one way. They said, well, they didn't really understand the question. You know,
because it was two distinct questions.
Right.
There was a part A and a part B.
I've taken my position quite clear on this. I think Puerto Rico can decide to be an independent country or to be a state. I don't care. I don't live in Puerto Rico. I live in a state. I already have the benefits that I believe that as an American citizen I'm entitled to. And if the Puerto Ricans want to live in that semi-status where they can be ordered to do things, and I tell you bark, jump, and you do it, and they like it, that's fine, except that I don't believe our Constitution permits that. I think our Constitution does not allow to have a second-class citizen. An American citizen can vote and not vote, can be in a position of servitude. And we had a civil war on that issue. So we cannot allow Puerto Ricans to live in this Commonwealth second-class citizen position or second-type citizenship because it doesn't exist under our Constitution. That's my interpretation of it. And I think that Puerto Ricans should be told, here you have two options. You either become an independent country, in which we love you. You know, hey, we have great relationship with lots of countries in the world, Dominican Republic and Israel. But
Puerto Rico is not going to survive economically.
Why? Why do you say such a thing? Puerto Rico has infrastructure, engineers, doctors, medical schools, law schools. Puerto Rico has everything.
And a lot of support from the federal government.
Well, so does Israel, and so does many other countries receive a portion of their country.
Foreign aid.
I think if they'll apply for foreign aid. I think Puerto Rico has everything that it needs if it wants to be an independent country. It has tremendous infrastructure, and I said the best engineers in this country. The best engineers in this country are coming from schools in Puerto Rico, and NASA was full of Puerto Rican engineers.
The point is that they're leaving the island because there's no
economic opportunity.
No opportunity to advance, and so they're coming here.
All right, but can they do it? They can. It's not like we're talking about the pyramid in the Indian tribes in Brazil. You know, we have got real infrastructure.
I think the Indian tribes in Brazil will survive better.
Well, maybe, but Puerto Rico has infrastructure. They can do it. Now, whether they should do it, that's another issue. Okay, that's another issue.
So
but
what's the advantage?
Huh?
What's the advantage? Okay,
Oh.
I know there's advantage. Lots of money.
Lots more money, sure.
Money. Okay, so.
But just dignity. I'll say dignity. Yeah. How could you say I'm an American citizen and you know they're all proud of being American, but not say I'm willing to vote when I can be sent to war and die? My sons can go to war and die. You'll take your children and go away. They'll tell you tomorrow they want to make illegal cockfighting, which is a national sport in Puerto Rico. But if the federal government wanted to make it illegal, they could. It's a question of dignity as well. Right. So I think there's only one way. It's either independent country, and I think Puerto Rico can do it, and other countries as small as Puerto Rico survive, right, or become a full-fledged member of the Union. In that case, of course, I would urge union, but if Puerto Ricans want to be an independent country, fine. But what I cannot support is this middle ground, which is no ground.
Mm-hmm. So most countries that are independent have things going for them: cocoa,
right,
corn,
right, something to export.
Coffee to export. So what does
intellectual? Imagine how powerful Puerto Rico could be as the one little nation that has most of its people speak English. It could have a software manufacturer. It could be the deal maker. It could be the Switzerland of Latin America, because there are more people who speak English per capita in Puerto Rico than in any other Latin American country.
On, Tony, you really believe that Puerto Rico can be the Switzerland of the America? I mean, you're talking about Cuba was that back in the 50s and 40s. There's no question. But in this era, I mean, they're based on the American dollar. No company's going to go set up there right now. They go to China. They go to other places. You pay $1 an hour for an employee.
No,
but see, they set on minimum
I don't
wage.
think Puerto Rico should be looking to be putting widgets, and pasting little magnets for your.
Like he said, what do they have to sell? What do they have to offer?
Because the very fact that they have been Americans, a de facto company, they know how to get involved in Google and all these other high tech positions, and so I think that they are in a very excellent position to be the transition nation between Latin America, where the future of the United States has got to be, as the world divides itself into economic spheres of Europe and China and America. Listen, and they can be the perfect conduit to bring the Latino community by way of computers and software into the American market.
You agree that the United States over its course of occupation, I think it's 100 and some odd years, 114 years.
114 years. Yeah.
Okay, that during that time that they have pretty much taken the farmers away, taking away all the people from the agricultural stuff.
There's no agriculture there.
Okay, so the only thing that's left, you said, is just the intelligence?
I think intellectual property.
Intellectual property?
But why look, South America, look at what's happening in Brazil.
Right.
Brazil is completely energy independent. They're becoming a powerhouse in the Americas.
Right.
Why do they have to go through Puerto Rico? They're their own, everybody's becoming their own deal maker. I mean, Chavez is not going to go to Puerto Rico. Colombia's not going to go to Puerto Rico. They're getting their own deals with trade and all of that.
Yeah, but what
they don't need Puerto Rico.
Deals are always made by people, not by countries.
And every deal maker wants to make his own deal.
Yeah, the difference is that you don't have to get to a translator if you're Portuguese and to try to make a business deal with an American company. If you have a Puerto Rican who's bilingual, totally and culturally attuned to what the American businessman wants, I think he can do it. He can do it better than anybody else.
Every major corporation has their own offices in South America, all over the place. I deal with Fortune 100 companies in New York, in their corporate headquarters. I know they have their own, offices and their own executives. They send their executives to each country, so they don't need an independent middle guy. But
everybody has a middle guy.
Listen, but everybody does business with Puerto Rico to be a middle guy.
Well, they don't need it, but Puerto Ricans will have to find themselves. What are they going to do? Start doing sugar cane and planting bananas?
Maybe,
they're not going to do that.
I know.
That's not going to happen. Not when you have university. You have a university system, and you got all these graduates. They will find a way to make themselves indispensable between the trade between Latin America and the United States.
I don't see it, but maybe they'll declare war on the United States. That'll be their solution. Everybody declares war on the United States, becomes rich.
So you're saying, you're basically making a case that for statehood, then it's best for them to become a state.
In my opinion, it's best for statehood, because then they can have a situation where you have Mayagüez, one of the best engineering schools in the country, and they graduate 300 engineers a year. Puerto Rico cannot use 300 engineers a year, so they need to export their people. So what would happen? Well, if they become an independent country, they're going to have to deal with with visas and limitations. The school will probably dwindle. because they're not going to get as many visas. But if they stay as a state, they can export all their talent. So obviously, I think statehood is best for Puerto Rico, but I do not discount the fact that Puerto Rico can become an independent country if they wish to. I mean, the Dominican Republic, with half the GDP of Puerto Rico, is a viable country.
Puerto Rico has huge drug problems, and the only thing that saved Puerto Rico from not becoming totally drug driven, okay, is the federal government. That the federal government has their finger in the dike, or else Puerto Rico would be owned by the drug dealers. And right now they have extensive drug problems there, and without the federal government,
tell me what country. Colombia has a huge drug. They had a civil war, and they dealt with it.
But Colombia is a much bigger country, and Puerto Rico is much smaller. I mean, you can drive
Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic has a big drug problem, and they deal with their. Every country has problems. Every country has problems. Puerto Rico will have problems, but it doesn't discount that it cannot be it has all the intellectual prowess and infrastructure to become a successful state.
Well, it's an interesting study to pull off.
It's true.
To make a study of that, because I just don't see Puerto Rico surviving as an independent country.
What would they have to give up to become a state? They have to give up something. Okay, what are they most afraid of? Do you think?
What they're most afraid of is this little concept that they make believe that they're a country. If you go to Puerto Rico, they all say mi país, as if Puerto Rico was a state, was its own country, and they would probably have to give up their team on the Olympics, and they'd probably have to give up their space in Miss Universe and all stuff with all these things that they competed, because they pretend that they're a country so they can keep their nationalism. Puerto Ricans are very nationalistic, and so they want to. If they become a state, they're afraid they would lose their Puerto Ricanness and their individuality as or individual cultural identity. Okay, that I think that's what they're afraid of.
It's interesting because when you say that they lose their Puerto Ricanness, because Puerto Ricans in the island don't think that Puerto Ricans who were born in New York are Puerto Rican.
Right.
You and I are not Puerto Rican.
And when we go to Port Island and we mess up the Spanish, then that confirms we're not very Puerto Rican.
Okay, but who's to say that they're speaking correct Spanish? They're not speaking correct Spanish. They're not speaking the mother language.
I think that's an excellent argument Socrates would make.
They're speaking an adaptation of Spanish. They don't speak. Puerto Ricans don't speak real Spanish.
We have New Rican language.
That's right. We have an adaptation of Russo.
That's right.
So does everybody else in every South American
Rufo,
country.
Yes.
So you're saying they would have to give up their language? That's where they're afraid.
I don't think so. I mean, they may be afraid of that, but nothing in our Constitution requires that English is an official language of anything. So I think that's a misnomer. I think that's just the boogeyman. They tell them that so they can scare them away from statehood.
Yeah, it's a political maneuver.
Only Santorum thinks about that.
Yeah, it's a political maneuver.
It is.
But it's Puerto Ricans that are all over the country. I mean, there's as many Puerto Ricans living in the United States mainland.
Actually, more. They're actually more
than in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And they all consider themselves Puerto Rican.
Right.
When I was talking to you off the camera, we were talking, about Puerto Rican, and you consider yourself Puerto Rican.
Right.
And I consider myself Puerto Rican, American Puerto Rican heritage. But, most Puerto Ricans that are here, that live here, and that have come here, we have a large number of Puerto Ricans coming from the island right now. Right. They're Puerto Rican.
Right.
You can't tell them that they're not Puerto Rican.
Los puros.
Yeah, the puros, the pure ones.
Yeah, the pure ones.
The pure ones.
We're the hybrid. Well, I've been dealing with that problem for a while, as you guys know. When I came down here from New York,
another foreign country.
I was president of the Puerto Rican Bar Association in New York, so I was a leader in the Puerto Rican community in New York. But in New York, you're Puerto Rican if you just say so. I'm Puerto Rican. Well, I guess so. And we never had any of our meetings in Spanish or anything like that. It was always everything was in English until I came down here. And then I realized that the majority of Puerto Ricans here are directly from the island.
Right.
And they have all their meetings in Spanish. And I was having a difficult time with that. And then they identify themselves, from what pueblo they're from. I'm Ponce. I'm from here, and I don't know one Ponce. I didn't know where Ponce was, the north or south, bro. You know? So I said, there's something wrong with this picture here, you know. So it was really difficult for me to adjust from being the president of the Puerto Rican Bar Association, leader within the Puerto Rican community in New York, to over here not even realizing for the first time maybe I'm not Puerto Rican, you know. And so that became a cultural shock for me. And then,
but now you're in Orlando, right, and still everybody in Orlando who's Puerto Rican considers them Puerto Rican. Right. It doesn't matter if they came from New York, New Jersey, Chicago, you know, whatever. They're Puerto Rican.
Yeah, but it will make a difference on the issue of language. For example, when we now divide ourselves within Republican Democrats, where you don't do that on the island, now you have to start thinking, am I a Republican or am I a Democrat? Because all the statehood identifications on the island are totally changed. So everyone starts dividing themselves, and we have questions about it.
You think it's a power thing? You think that some people on the island, you know, they're involved in politics and pull the strings, are going to feel that they're going to have their strings pulled even more if they become a state? They're going to lose that I know it's a psychological state of mind.
Sure.
But is it a reality?
I know. I don't think it is, because the party that's in power now, the Commonwealth Party, they sell themselves, and the word in Spanish is lema. I forget the word in English now. But their mantra is, we have the best of both worlds, because they're part of the United States, but they are their own country, because they have a baseball team in the Olympics and they participate in the Olympics. So they have the best of both worlds. Actually, factually, they have the worst of both worlds, because they are not a country, do not have sovereignty, cannot control their borders, and they're not really part of the United States, because they don't get the same funds from the federal government, the formula that all states get from federal government. They don't get the same formula, and they're dictated to as to everything. Well, we want higher content in milk. Get rid of your cows. They'll just have to do it. So they have the worst of both worlds, but they tell their people they have the best of both worlds. So it is a power state. The minute Puerto Rico becomes a state, all those liars will be out of a job. You know.
Okay.
That's the way it is, you know, and I see it as a psychological power thing, because that's going to shift a lot of attitudes psychologically.
Now, you guys have been here.
The patron concept,
right,
you know?
Right. Well, you guys have been here a lot longer than I have. So are we going to count or allow to be counted the Puerto Ricans here, have a say-so in what happens to the affairs of the island, or the affairs of the island are only for those who live on the island?
Okay, wait, Jose, we're out of time, guys.
Oh.
So that question is for next week's show, because we're going to continue with this as we go forward. Okay. This is Danny Ramos, and this is, what's your name again?
Tony.
Tony Suarez. I was only kidding. Tony Suarez, and you know, everybody knows Tony. He's one of the top lawyers here in Central Florida. Hispanic Speak Out TV. We're going to see you next week with more on Puerto Rico, independence or statehood. We'll see you next week. We're in hard times, and some of us are going to need a lawyer. And if you need a lawyer, don't just react to a TV commercial. Get a copy of the Lawyers Consumer Directory, which is available absolutely free of charge at any 7-Eleven store throughout Central Florida. The Lawyers Consumer Directory is going to give you real hardcore knowledge on how to hire a lawyer, and a lot of information on issues like bankruptcy, foreclosure, and more. Get the Lawyers Consumer Directory. It's absolutely free of charge at any 7-Eleven throughout Central Florida.
Ahora puedes demostrar tu orgullo hispano mientras manejas en la carretera con la nueva tablilla o placa de auto hispana conmemorando los 500 años del descubrimiento de Florida por Juan Ponce de León.
Obtén tu tablilla hispana este año y harás la diferencia.
Solo 1,000 se necesitan para hacerla permanente.
Su donativo ayudará a estudiantes con becas.
Nuestra comunidad se beneficiará con más programas y servicios.
Resalta nuestra cultura, nuestras raíces.
Demostremos que en la unión está la fuerza.
Obtén tu tablilla hispana en el Departamento de Vehículos de Motor más cercano o llama hoy al 321-277-0850.